You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I'm going to clip that first part off.
Yeah, I hope so.
Maybe. It makes me look like an idiot, not you, so...
But you should be used to that by now.
I should be used to that. I'm just saying that it doesn't reflect on you in any negative way.
Exactly.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
You threw us for a loop.
How so?
But you changed our schedule.
It's all about adaptation. Those that adapt survive.
Yeah.
Charles Darwin told you that years and years ago.
But we're doing this in the afternoon. We usually do it in the morning, and now I'm all discombobulated.
You got that pasta high that you need to take a nap?
Well, some of that.
Some of that.
Yeah. But
could be sugar.
But
that'd be the other way.
But you do get into a rhythm. I mean, people get into a rhythm. They're used to doing things in a certain way at a certain time in a certain order. And when it gets disrupted,
You're saying we're a very rhythmic people?
Yeah. Well, some people are.
Some of us.
Yeah. You're adaptable. You were born ready, and you're adaptable.
That's how you survive.
That's how you survive. Okay, so
which is a perfect lead-in to our conversation today, which was requested by our very good friend from Australia.
Well, I wasn't going to say names because you tell me
she's from Australia.
You tell me not to say names, but yes, that is correct. I just
said don't take any names in vain.
Especially not hers.
Yeah.
But yes, she is a North Star for us. She remains in contact with us, which is fantastic. And she had requested us.
She's actually from Australia. Wouldn't she be Southern Cross?
Well, North Star. North Star as far as the guiding light for the show.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's
as a meme, so to
yes,
speak.
as a meme, because you told me what a meme was, which now I'm more confused than I was before. But
that's my goal.
We had done a show, and actually I don't know which show we had. I think we had done a show on
so many
family traumas, family of origin issues.
Yeah.
And the question was about generational trauma, and is that an actual thing? And if it is, what is it, and how does it present?
Yeah. Well, that's a challenging question in general in psychology, because everybody who studies the field finds some little niche to put themselves in and market it and be an expert. Mm-hmm. And so the perception that in order to have a good therapist, you need to have one that's an expert in your particular issue. The challenge there is the presenting problem by which you're often identified is almost never the real problem.
Yeah.
And people get themselves to therapy by any variety of means, often because they're told they have to. If you don't go to therapy, I'll get a divorce. If you don't go to therapy, we'll fire you from your job. We can't put up with this stuff anymore. You have to get some help, so go get help. Mm-hmm. And then the marketplace tries to control access to the helpers by licensures and regulations and specializations. And so, if you develop a specialization on working with Jewish kids from concentration camps, then you get a license for that. If you develop a specialization of working with Muslim kids from concentration camps, then you get a license for that. And you just keep going on and on and on. So if we talk about intergenerational trauma and trauma memory and trauma bonding and trauma behaviors, adaptive trauma responses, all of those things, if we can get enough conversation going around that topic, then we can get people that'll specialize in the treatment of it and get their get themselves credentialed in some way to say, I am the person. If you have a multi-generationally dysfunctional family, and who among us does not, then come see me. So
well,
I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
But you're not saying that it isn't a thing. You're just saying that
I'm saying
that an individual need not feel obligated to find someone who has a credential on their wall that says, I deal with your problem
I think
only.
Any well-trained clinician should be able to deal with almost any topic of concern that people are struggling with. I think there's a place for specializations for more serious and intense disturbances of one kind or another. But I think generically, if you're a licensed clinician, you should be able to take somebody that walks in the front door and say, let me help.
Sure. And that's always an issue when we're training individuals,
Right.
and then they want to say, oh, well, I have to go and I have to get this
Yeah.
this degree or this license or this credential, and we're saying to them, you need to
get
be
skills
more flexible,
first. Yeah.
because if you're only going to deal with substance abuse, then there's a large part of the population that you're limiting yourself from being able to have access to, and why would you want to do that?
Well, and also there are just a lot of overlaps. I mean, for instance, when we were doing the research on intergenerational trauma, we found information about shame, anxiety, relationship patterns, parenting patterns, dissociative process patterns. So any clinician is going to have a client base that among whom are dealing with anxiety, shame, parenting skills or lack thereof, relationship issues, dissociative process issues. I mean, if you have a general population base that
Right.
comes to you, they're all
Right.
going to have those presentations.
Right. And, what you don't want to get into is a situation where a person says, I've lost a child, I'm grieving. You can only understand me if you've lost a child.
Yeah. Or
Right.
if you've been raped, or
Right.
if you've been a drug addict, or if you've seen a child get run over by a car. I mean, if you didn't see it and you didn't experience it and experience all the emotional volatility from it, then how can you understand where I'm coming from?
Right.
How can you help me?
Right.
So that is one of the challenges.
So we would challenge
To
both.
which end I used to say to clients, you know what, come and talk to me. Come and talk to me once or twice. And if you don't feel like I am the right person for you, I won't charge you. But if you come back third time, pay me for the first 2 visits. And then we'll see how it goes.
And
I was very comfortable doing that.
and because nobody ever didn't come the third time, or very few people ever didn't
I
come.
noticed.
Yeah. And so we would be saying both to clients as well as clinicians, don't pigeonhole yourself. Don't pigeonhole the clinician.
Absolutely.
And as a person going to get a degree or a license to be a professional helper, don't pigeonhole yourself. Now, I mean, if you just say, there's this one thing that I'm agenda driven to go do, and you're just going to go do it, I mean, then whatever. Okay. I mean, that's,
I distrust therapists with causes.
yeah, it's usually,
Usually
about-
they have that harm background in their own life, and they're on a mission of some kind.
and
And to me, the mission of the therapist is to take the client that comes in, wherever they happen to be, and help them get stronger so that whatever issues they are having in their lives are less painful and less disruptive to the pattern of their life.
And the issue that I have with somebody saying, okay, I have this agenda and I'm going to work on this agenda, that's about you then. That's about the therapist. And you're never supposed to do therapy to satisfy the needs of the therapist. You're always supposed to do therapy to satisfy the needs of the
Right.
client. And if you're on an agenda, then by definition,
Well, some therapists with these multi-generational patterns in their own lives need to create a dependency on the part of their clients. My clients need me so much that I feel validated, that I feel good, that I feel anchored in who I am because I have all these people clamoring for my help and my attention.
and saying, oh my gosh, don't ever go away because
Yeah.
we'll be lost without you.
Right.
So to the extent that the multi-generational trauma is a thing,
Yeah.
what's your conceptualization of what that is, how that...
Well, my conceptualization is that there are patterns that people adapt to create to adapt to circumstances. And if you have the circumstances in which there's a heavily patriarchal family pattern, then within that pattern you have an abusive, dictatorial patriarch, father, who disrespects you, who says, I don't care about your feelings, I care about your behaviors. I'm going to discipline you. I'm going to beat you until I get the behaviors I want from you. Don't ask questions. Don't say why. Not allowed to say why. Not allowed to say yeah, but. Not allowed to say I don't want to. Not allowed to say no. You have to just do what I tell you to do if you want to survive without extensive pain. So those children in that household grow up understanding that that is the pattern of families and the behavior of men. And if within that pattern the male is also sexually abusive, disrespectful to his wife, physically abusive to her, beats her, punches her, slaps her, commands her in degrading ways, and or if he subsequently becomes abusive to his daughters sexually, then those girls and those boys in those families grow up seeing this is the way in which men treat women. This is the way that you're supposed to be. And even if you don't like it, you inculcate it into your patterns, and those are reflexive. So if you don't want to be that person, then when you grow up, you have to fight not to be. You have to learn to be new ways. And therapy can help with that.
And so people tend to embody the examples that they've been shown, even when they think that they want to be different. So most of us would grow up saying, I'm not going to be anything like my parents.
Oh, almost everybody.
Right. And then yet when you get into the situation where you are a parent, inevitably you're not going to realize it, but you're going to fall into those patterns because that's just how people are.
Well, there's a therapist named Harville Hendricks who achieved some notoriety and published a number of books and created a whole field of thought for doing couples counseling. And Harville Hendricks generated this theory called the imago, in which he says you internalize the conflicts that you have with your parents. And when you grow up and start looking for a relationship with a partner, male or female, whomever that may be, you're going to find somebody who on the surface doesn't look at all like your mother or your father, but who subconsciously presents in similar ways and has similar issues. And so you'll marry a partner that allows you the opportunity to continue to try to resolve the struggle that you had with whichever parent that was. And there are standard jokes in comedy about boys grow up and marry their mothers, girls grow up and marry their fathers. Well, there's some truth to that, but it pattern-wise.
Right.
But it can also go the other way. The boys can grow up and marry the personality pattern of their father. Not anything about homosexuality or gender identity confusion or anything like that, but just you look for someone that hums to the tune that you recognize.
That's right.
And then you try to dance that tune with them.
And every theory, well, other than maybe strict behavioralism, but generally every theory of psychology has a way of being able to explain that phenomenon. I mean, obviously Freud talked about it, Hendricks talks about it, Mary Ainsworth and people who followed her and John Bowlby in attachment theory talk about it. So clearly it's a thing. It's a thing that we do. We do it unconsciously. Nobody knows how it is that you find an alcoholic man over and over and over again, right? Or
how many conversations
emotionally
did you have
unavailable woman.
I mean, the research shows very clearly that a woman will typically not divorce her husband just because he's an alcoholic. If she reaches the point where she divorces him, it's going to be because he's abusing the kids, or he won't go to work and pay for the house or whatever, and she can't tolerate it anymore. So for those external reasons, not for the alcoholism alone, she divorces him. And then she swears, I'm never going to marry another drunk. I'm not going to date a man that drinks. And she starts dating somebody with the exact same behavior patterns, except the alcohol may not be visible. And it may not be there, but the pattern of the alcoholic is there. And so then she'll marry him. And 5 years later, she comes in for counseling, and she's like, how did this happen to me? It's the same guy. Different name, different body, but same guy. And what you say is, you didn't learn what you need to learn. You didn't work through the stuff you need to work through. Well, what would that be? Well, let's take a look at the patterns. There are multi-generational patterns that are impacting. No. I'm an individual. I'm a free spirit. I make my own ways. There's no way that could be happening. Okay, I hear you. You may be right. Maybe I'm wrong. But can I ask you some questions? Can we go back and talk about how many different boyfriends you've had? What did they have in common? How were they similar? How were they dissimilar? What did they believe about parenting? What did they believe about punishing children? How did they believe in discipline? How were they with self-discipline? How were they with respect for you? And walk through the pattern. And if you just keep listening, not challenging the denial, not saying,
Right.
I'm the therapist, I know better, I know, I've had training in this field, I know that. You just keep saying, okay, I want to get this accurately. Help me understand. What happened in this situation? What did he say? How did he look? What was his body language? How were his eyes? How was his voice? Did he raise his fist? Did he break a glass on the table? Did he throw a dish? Did he embarrass you in public? Did he take you out somewhere and make fun of you so that other people laughed at you? What happened here? And eventually they say, oh my God. Oh my God, I see it. Now how do I change it?
Right. Okay, let's take our break and we'll come back and we'll talk about how to change it.
Okay.
Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. So when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. And so one of the things that I have always said to my clients on exactly this issue is that people have attractometers the same as airplanes have altimeters.
Yeah.
And if your altimeter is broken, and you're flying an airplane and you're trying to fly the airplane with a broken altimeter, you're going to crash. And so if you have an attractometer that's miscalibrated, if you don't figure out how to recalibrate the attractometer, then you're always going to be attracted to that wrong kind of person.
Yeah.
And what that means is that you have to figure out what are all the things that you want. Find somebody that checks all of those boxes, and inevitably, I guarantee you that if you find somebody who does that, you will not be attracted to them. And you have to date that person anyway, because your attractometer is broken. Your attractometer is picking up on things that aren't in that list of things that you want to be in a healthy relationship, that have to do with things about an unhealthy relationship. And if you keep on following that attractometer, you're inevitably going to fall into the same hole over and over again. But it's hard for people to do that, because when we talk about this multi-generational trauma situation, it's all based on patterns, and you talk about the patterns all the time.
It's what you look for.
And we get inculcated with them, as you said in the beginning, from our parents. And this is the same way. We're inculcated with this pattern recognition that's
and
unconscious.
it can be more than our parents. It can also be our church, our community. If we're raised in a particular community, especially a homogeneous one, a tightly knit homogeneous community, as opposed to a heterogeneous one. Difference being the amount of variety that you're exposed to, the amount of different kinds of people. With different belief patterns and different ways of solving problems and different ways of acting. You're going to look for the comfortable shoe.
Right.
You're going to look for the one that fits without having to think about it. The music starts playing and you know how to dance, you start dancing. And that makes you feel better because it makes you feel like you fit in. And one of the worst things that people struggle with is a feeling of isolation, of aloneness, of uniqueness, of difference. I want to be like other people who are like me so that we can all be together in some kind of harmony. So that's a challenge. They may say they want to be an individual and unique, but that's not really what they're looking for.
But the way out, the way off of the carousel, is by changing the pattern.
Yeah.
And by changing the pattern, that's going to always make the individual uncomfortable, because it's out of their homeostasis. It's out of their predictable way of doing things. And if you can't embrace that discomfort, if you can't allow yourself to experience that, then there's no way out of the cycle.
So as a therapist, you're trained with all these philosophical orientations and backgrounds. How do you specifically help an individual client be willing to take the risk to try a new behavior. And it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I remember talking to any number of recently divorced men in their 40s who didn't expect to be divorced, and suddenly they are divorced. Maybe after they've had a home for 20 years that they were buying, they're suddenly in an apartment again, and their wife and kids are in the home, and maybe the new guy's moved into the home. And so they're feeling all violated and outraged, and life doesn't work, and how blah, blah, blah. And I would say to them, you have to redefine yourself. You have to find a way to spend your time. You have to find places to go and people to be around that expose you to new and different opportunities. And that's going to be uncomfortable and miserable. You have to understand that going in. And so we need to give you some techniques for practicing new behaviors that may embarrass you or feel awkward to you. In Gestalt therapy, one of the things that we were taught to do is like squeeze your facial muscles as tight as you can squeeze them, and then open your mouth and your eyes as wide as you can open them. Do that like 10 times, just one right after the other. Tighten up, expand, tighten up, expand. It causes you to become aware of things that you were not aware of before, and feel things that you didn't normally feel. And you say, well, that looks stupid. Especially if we have a Gestalt group of some, everybody in the room sitting around doing that. And you'll get people like me that'll say, oh, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. Well, there is a point to it. There's a reason for it. And they have to take it on faith, and they have to do something different. So if you normally listen only to Willie's Roadhouse, if you only listen to country music, then you need to make yourself listen to classical music or rock music or reggae or whatever, some other genre.
So, but what you're talking about is breaking the pattern.
Yes.
But so, and we started this podcast by talking about the pattern because we're outside of our regular pattern. I was talking about how that felt a little uncomfortable.
In the afternoon as opposed to the morning. Yeah.
And yet we are doing that, and we're doing it, and I think we're doing it well because we're adaptable. So you can be adaptable. You can break the pattern and you can tolerate it, but you have to be able to tolerate the ambiguity. Do you need to see the pattern? Do you need to be aware of the pattern to break it?
I think so.
Yeah, I do too. But I think there's some people who would say you don't.
It won't hold.
Yeah.
If you don't cognitively embrace it objectively and practice the new behaviors to internalize them and normalize them, whenever you take your conscious attention off of it, then you'll drift back on autopilot, which will be the pattern with which you were raised.
Right. And so when we talk about brief intervention, solution-focused psychotherapy, where you're talking about a psychotherapy model where you're doing 3 to 6 sessions,
I don't talk about that because I don't believe in it.
Well, but I mean, it is a thing in society.
I know.
And they would say, no, you just come in, the person says, hey, I need to meet 3 new people. You work on meeting 3 new people. Once they become
finished.
Right. Yeah. But I think that if you don't recognize the pattern, because you would never recognize the pattern in 3 to 6 sessions, that you regress to the mean, like you're talking about, and then the gains diminish, and it's because you don't see the pattern. You have to be able to see the pattern to really be able to break the pattern.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's hard because
not a lot of times. It's always hard.
I mean,
change is hard.
Well, I mean, you grow up in a family of origin, and maybe you love those people, and maybe you think that those people gave you a lot of good things.
You've been told all your life that you love them, and you have to love them. You have to love your mom. You have to love your dad. I mean, what else can you do? You can say that's an abusive SOB, and I don't love him. Not really, not honestly. I remember having a client that was raised in a rigid Italian Catholic family, and I mean, they were really very rigidly Italian and Catholic in all the requirements and rules that they had. And initially, my client couldn't say out loud that she hated her father, which she did. She had reason for it. But it took ages of time. And initially, when she started trying to flirt with being able to say that, and I would say to her, you don't have to mean it. You just have to say it out loud.
Right.
Say it out loud, hear yourself say it, and then say, how do I feel about that? What do I think? Because you may turn out to love your dad if we pursue this and find out. But let's find out, because there's a lot of resistance there. So can you say it? She could whisper it. She could move her lips, but she couldn't say it out loud. I said, can you hear it in your head? She said, yeah, I hear it in my head. I said, it's only going to work if you hear it outside your head.
Right.
And
you got to make it real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So eventually she did. but then it didn't hold for her because she didn't change her patterns, and she got sucked back into the whole larger enmeshed family dynamic with the siblings and
we're doing this podcast between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah.
And this is something that we always deal with during this period of time. Clients are going to come in
people
and
hate
say,
their families.
Yeah, I got to go back to this family gathering, and yet there's this person there, or how do we're all over the board politically, and it's hard for people. And one of the things that we routinely say is, you have the right to protect you. You have the right to say no.
Well, one of the jokes that are often made at this time of year is, when you go to Thanksgiving, be sure to talk religion and politics.
Then you don't have to go to
that means you won't have
Christmas.
to spend as much money on Christmas presents.
All right. Hopefully that is good for everybody. And if you have questions or comments, as always, you can get us at psychwithmike.com. You can find us on Twitter at psychwithmike, on Facebook at psychwithmike. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.